Let's do it.
Welcome to the I Know Nothing podcast, where you will learn nothing. And apparently, I actually know nothing because today we have on my brother, Jami June, and I told him Old Loudon Road. And I keep getting people driving to the wrong location because this is New Loudon Road. So before I start this podcast, I should tell you he is the smarter brother, obviously, because I can't even get the directions to where I'm currently at every single day. So, with that being said, Jami, I obviously know who you are. You have to give us your elevator pitch of who you are and why someone should listen to you.
Yeah, so I'm Jamie, Matt's brother. As a disclaimer, I also know nothing. Uh, uh, yeah, just briefly, in this context, I like to think I'm an athlete and have been my whole life. But day to day, I manage the mining program for the Department of Environmental Conservation. I'm also a certified nutrition coach. I've also written a book. Um, so I have a lot of different interests that span a lot of different domains. But fundamentally, the way I live my life still is like an athlete. I feel like I still train like an athlete. I still eat like an athlete, and I still live like one. So that's kind of my background.
You should listen to him. We're going to start. Obviously, this is my brother, so him and I can go off on tangents. We're going to try to stay to the questions that are directly related to like his experience growing up as an athlete to the point where he's at today. So, growing up, what are all the sports that you played? When did you start? What sports did you play? And take us through high school.
So, youth sport wise, uh, football, basketball, baseball, um, all the way up until I was a freshman in high school. When I was a freshman, I just played basketball and baseball. Sophomore year, I stopped playing basketball and ran track. Also did taekwondo. Um, Still played baseball. Junior year, I just played baseball. And then senior year, I played football and baseball. So quite the spread
Yeah.
across a lot of different years. But I think that just shows as it's extended to my adult life, I just have a lot of interests. So, um, you know, but it's also been the athletic sphere too. And then after that, I didn't probably should have played baseball in college, but didn't end up playing baseball. But played some summer ball here and there. I played in basketball leagues here and there as an adult over the past decade or so. Um, and at this point, just training for whatever's next. So,
I don't think I know this answer. Why did you skip around with sports so much in high school?
baseball was always the foundation.
Yeah.
Like that was always straightforward. Like I love baseball, so I always played it. I think we can get into a lot of different reasons of why we both stopped playing basketball.
Fighting.
You were a lot better track runner than I was, but I just really did it to stay in shape for baseball. And then, at the end of the day, football has always been a huge passion of both of ours.
Yeah.
So I had to play before I left high school. But yeah, I mean, I don't have a great answer. It's just a lot of different interests, depending on how I was feeling at the time, I guess.
Yeah.
So,
story of Jamie's life.
Yeah.
My disclaimer, I wasn't a better track runner. I was on a better team. Shout out Coach Palmer. Thanks for a state championship. Okay, so we both got to have our dad as our coach in all sports, really. So can you just like give your explanations? Don't tap into the World Series year yet because we're going to get to that. But what it was like having dad as your coach, because your experience growing up with him was slightly different than mine. Jamie and I are 4 years apart. He's younger, which sucks for us because we never got to play on any teams together other than two. That game, we were up by about 97 runs in the first inning, and it got rained out. And the next time, I got thrown out of a basketball game because somebody tried to foul my brother. So that was it. But what was it like having dad as your coach?
Yeah, so dad coached me in football, basketball, and baseball. And we can get into this if you want, but I've written about it extensively in the book that I wrote.
Yep.
But at the end of the day, Dad was trying to create young men,
Yeah.
respectable young men that uh, were good human beings, and he knew how to do that through sport with some foundational principles that I think we still carry to
Yeah.
this day. Um, and for me personally, I know Dad used to get really frustrated with me because he could always see my potential, but he always had to drag it out of me, which hindsight's 2020. I can see why him and
Yeah.
I used to butt heads a little bit, and he
Yeah.
would get really frustrated. But he had that ability, and I know how many people can speak on his behalf, where he was able to bring out the best in his kids and his other coaches. So I mean, I know I'm super thankful for it.
Yeah. And just to go off of that, I always make the joke where I moved away from the area from our hometown for a bit. And when I would come home, I would see people that both Jamie or I played with and under our dad's coaching. And their first question always was not how I'm doing or he's doing, how's your dad doing? And I think that tells a lot where, yes, he did bring out the best in both him and I, but as a coach, he brought out the best in I think he made a lot of young people reach a point that they never thought they could at a young level. And people live in the past, but all of my friends who didn't really go on and play much past high school, they still remember the good times that dad brought them. So it's cool, and I just bring it up. We'll probably bring on my dad at some point. We'll need about 2 hours for all types of things, but shout out, Dad, if you're out there. Um, okay, how about mom? So our mom was just as much of an important role for us, but in a different way. I wrote it. We were in the sauna this morning at 5:40, like nobody else was in the world, and I joked. I'm like, Dad was this person for us beyond sports, but he was our coach and our dad. Where our mom was our mom, but also our manager, our agent, our cook, our everything. She essentially ran the house, but everything that we did. So maybe if you have any insight of like, okay, growing up as an athlete specifically, like all the things that mom did outside of the field that helped you.
Yeah, I mean, Mom kept the operation running
Mm-hmm.
at the end of the
Yeah,
day,
yeah,
and I think Mom also showed us what some of the things Dad was trying to teach us through coaching, what it looked like in real life. What does
yeah,
discipline look like? What's it look like to wake up every day and do your job? Not just do it, but to the best of your ability
yeah.
every single day and still do all of the tasks you're required to do as a mother and as a parent. So, um, and logistically, if we had to travel somewhere, it was like some people will understand this reference, but
Yeah.
the list making and the
Yeah.
post-it notes. So that was all covered. You and I didn't have to think about much when it
Right.
came to where we had to be, when we had to be there, and how we were going to be fed. That all
Right.
those things. So yeah, she basically she took care of all of that stuff for us.
We'll probably get into this later on, but you know, him and I mean, relentlessly joked with our mom about she's always writing lists. She had itineraries done for everything, and we always thought it was overboard. And now him and I have turned into her with that. So thanks, mom. We'll have her on too. We're going to need a lot of time for that. But the reason I'm bringing it up is him and I were both decent athletes in youth. We both played on. He could have played in college in multiple sports, but it wasn't by accident. Yeah, both of our parents were athletes and stuff, but we had a foundation from a great home life that we were able to get to this point. And honestly, to the point where now we live in the same town, hopefully neighbors very soon, and we have come full circle of all of a lot of our life revolved around sports. And my point of what we're going on here is like we didn't get that chance without our parents. So it's pretty cool. I want to fast forward up to 15-year-old season. We probably don't even have more than enough time to talk about all these things. So let me just give my brief synopsis and then I want you to just take it. So when Jamie was 15, we had at the time, this is when baseball was a little different. You are a town team, you make an all-star team based on all of the rec teams, and you then go and you compete for a World Series. One World Series, not 97 different showcases and everybody thinks they're good. One. They had a great team. A lot of intricate things happened. Jamie wrote a book partially on this season and other things that went about with it, but specifically to that season, Can you be the one to take us through from like the start to finish and anything on the outside?
Yeah. So, uh, when it's your 15-year-old season, I don't know if Babe Ruth is still a thing anymore, but when
Yeah,
it was, that's
yeah,
your last year.
right,
Playing Babe Ruth ball, and it was Dad's last opportunity to coach me, anyways. Um, so he was able to be selected as the manager of the team, and he put together a team that he thought had the best chance to win. And on paper, were we the best team were we a elite team? Probably not. But we had a coach and a set of coaches that was going to make sure we were going to compete against anyone
right,
across at the end of the day across the country.
right.
We put in a lot of time. We were putting in football practices every single day to get ready for the tournaments that we were playing in. And realistically, we should have won more tournaments than we did. We actually ended up losing a couple, and because of the way that tournaments are designed, you get automatic um, bids into other tournaments. So that's how we made it all the way to the regionals. Um, we had lost the previous two tournaments in the finals, um, but we just kept chipping away, chipping away, chipping away, and by the time we got to the regional tournament, we we dominated.
Yeah.
We dominated teams from across the region, a bunch of different states, and teams that were really good. And one of the teams that went to the World Series the previous year, and I think we beat them by 20 runs.
Yeah.
So, it was all coming to fruition. And then we ended up making the finals game, and we played the team that was the favorite to win. I think they had their flight tickets booked. Their parents were talking about it before the
No,
game.
they had their flight tickets booked.
So there you go. We were, we ended up, getting knocked on our ass immediately. I think the score ended up being like 11-3
Yeah.
by the fifth inning, and we ended up adhering to the things that Dad was telling us to adhere to every single day, and we crawled our way out of it and ended up winning and going on to the World Series. And I think that's a brief synopsis of what took place over several months, but it just goes to show, how important it was to have Dad as a coach. And if you have that cohesive unit who has the buy-in to those principles, what you can do.
Well, I'm just curious, what were those things that you're talking about? Like, what were those things that were instilled to you and to the team that year that
So
you guys
I break
fell
it
back
down
on?
into four things. So discipline, hustle, sportsmanship, and sacrifice.
Mm.
So discipline, straightforward. You got to show up and do your job every single
Yeah,
day,
yeah,
and not just on the baseball field, but outside it too. Hustle, pretty straightforward on the baseball field. Try, try as hard as you can.
yeah.
Sportsmanship, being a good sport, not to your teammates, to the other team, to the umpires, to your coaches, and sacrifice. To get to where we had to go, we had to be willing to sacrifice. We had to sacrifice our summer, and doing things that other kids were doing to have fun, so that we could get better. Sacrificing on the baseball field. I think I was the two hitter, three hitter.
Yeah.
I don't remember exactly, but I don't want to bunt.
Right, right.
But if the game's on the line, you bet your ass I'm putting a bunt down.
Yeah.
So that's what it takes. And all that thing culminates into reaching your potential. What are you capable of if you adhere to those things? So I think that's the perfect, cauldron of where all of those things kind of melted together.
I'll just, because he's being very humble, I just want to at least explain the story I'll just do it from not just Big Brother, but at the time I was simply a fan and cheering on him and all of his friends that I was actually working with, during that season where they got to this point, it's down 11-3, and from the fans' perspective, it's different. When you're in a game, these guys were essentially in a unified flow state at this point where I don't think anybody believed that they were about to lose this because there was other things going on that we're going to get into him writing the book that you can go read about in the book. It wasn't just about a baseball season. And, there was just no way they were losing this game. At least that was the feeling. It was a general feel that was going on. And as they chipped away, one run here, one run there, a ball just tips off a glove here, all the things in sport and in life that need to happen for you to be successful. Jami leads off the final inning with a line drive that went almost through the fence, right? But that hit signified all of those things he's talking about, all the preparation, the sacrifice. It wasn't lucky that he get the hit. It was because he stuck through that the game wasn't over. Gets that, sparks it. Baseball plays out the way it does. He gets back up. Bases are juiced. At the time, it was what? You're down 2 or 3?
I think 2, yeah.
Okay, it wouldn't have mattered anyways, but bases are juiced. Everybody in that Saugerties baseball arena knew what was about to happen. There was the first pitch, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. First pitch, it has to be the first ball you've ever hit. This ball's got to be.
Might be.
I mean, it's got to be 380 at the peak, probably. Home run, grand slam, game over, and I mean, it has to be arguably one of the greatest baseball experiences or sport experiences our family at least has ever experienced. But everything it's Jamie saying was where it wasn't by accident that this happened. They stuck true to what they were doing. They sacrificed a lot to get to that point, and they ended up on their final year, Babe Ruth, having the most miraculous season ever and making it to a World Series, which most people on here have never been to something even close to that. And it was an amazing experience for them and something that these guys have cherished forever. That was when you were 15 and you're now about to be what?
31.
31. So that was
16 years
16 years ago. He's smart. I'm not good at math. Okay. Let's move on to now your senior season of baseball, because that group somewhat stayed together with the additions of other really good baseball players. Yep. Can you take us into that season? Because you guys also made a great run.
Yeah, so when we were seniors, we had a great team. I think 1 through 9, everyone could have played college baseball.
Yeah.
At a minimum at the Division III level. I think we had 4 or 5 guys play at the Division I level. One of our guys is in AAA right now. So, the year before we were not satisfied with the outcome, and we knew that we had the best team in the area without question.
Yeah.
And we were all on the same page about what we were willing to do, again, to sacrifice to win. And we dominated the whole year without question. I think we lost 2 games, to the same team.
Yeah.
To a pitcher who happens to be pitching for the Phillies. So that's what it took.
It was an NL All-Star.
Yeah, that's what it took to beat us. So, yeah. And I can live with that. But, that was kind of carrying forward the beginning, the roots that were placed in that 15-year-old season with Dad, carrying it with a lot of the same guys and other guys who were on the same page and bringing that through to that season as well.
And you guys end up losing to Jeff Hoffman. Pitched that game or no?
Yeah, he pitched in the sectional final.
So you had to, at that time in this area, you had Hoffman. Shout out Jeff Hoffman. He came here. They had to defeat a multi-year professional baseball player, and you guys came close. And it was just very impressive for a group of town kids to be showing up. And you can kind of see the picture that we're painting here. Is Jami got to grow up with a phenomenal group of friends, having mom and dad, having dad as a coach, and then getting to this point now where he's just overly successful as an adult, as a father, as a husband. Let's take one step back, just because I want people to understand that you're an author. You wrote a book partly on the season of you being a 15-year-old, and we don't have to get too much into the weeds, but can you just maybe just go over at least a brief? This is your plug for your book for people to buy it. Just give us just an overall view of the book, why you wrote it, and stuff like that.
Yeah, so just briefly, we have a close family friend who was, to put it simply, dealt a really shitty hand of cards. And, her family happens to have a pretty significant genetic disease called Huntington's disease. And at the time, her one daughter, her name is Rachel, she used to love coming to all our games, especially my games in particular. She was my biggest fan. And she used to come to my football games, baseball games. And by the time we were 15, she had been diagnosed with the illness a few years prior. And she was rapidly deteriorating. She was in a wheelchair, basically lost the ability to do anything.
Yeah.
So her mother, Lori, was, essentially taking care of her 24/7. It's brutal. So, the book's kind of about how Lori, as a human being, embodied the principles that Dad taught us,
Yep.
and connects baseball, what we were doing on the field, and what it looks like in real life at the pinnacle of someone who could throw their hands up and just say, you know what, I was dealt a shitty hand of cards, and I'm gonna, not be the most ethical human being, but Lori's probably the best human being that I know in my life. So, that's really, at the end of the day, what the book's about. So,
What's the title of the book?
Butterflies on the Bases.
There's your plug. You guys should read that book. It is unbelievable. It's just another piece of who you've become, and the fact that you even had time to write a book. I don't know where he gets all this. I keep asking him how he reads so many books. I can't read a page. It's an awesome book. I think you should read it. I think you should take your own opinion on it. But it's just amazing, an amazing story that is a true story, and Jami does a great job of explaining, how you can basically take it and bring it into your own world. Okay, I don't know if it was 2020. I don't know when it was. 2021, when you started dealing with a ton of gut issues, and this kind of led us to you getting a nutrition certificate.
Mm-hmm.
I obviously know about it. Can you give us? Let's go start with it until you ended up you ended up finding out how to fix yourself.
So I'd say it was the winter of 2021 going into spring of 2022. I started having a lot of just gut health issues and couldn't figure it out. And it was starting to get scary because I lost like 30 pounds. I weighed as much as I did when I was 15 at 28 or however old I was. And, went to see a lot of different doctors, which ended up just being a lot of wasted money.
This was like regular doctors. This was cash-based doctors.
So this was holistic doctor, multiple GI doctors, multiple sets of blood work, scans, some telehealth things, and at the end of the day, I was offered nothing. A couple prescriptions from a GI doctor who had no idea what was going on. And just said, here, take this to try it for symptoms that I didn't have.
Yeah.
So, I did end up having to get some imaging done, and I had what's called an intussusception, which means that part of my large intestine was folded into my small intestine, which is not great, obviously.
Yeah.
And the only advice I got, they just told me that and then said, if you don't pass anything through your body in 48 to 72 hours, you need to be rushed to an emergency room. That was the advice I was given because it can be fatal at the end of the day. So that'll give you some anxiety.
Yeah.
And we also had, our daughter was on the way in a couple of months while this was going on. I was also promoted at work. So was bearing a lot of weight while in the real world shedding all my physical weight and not getting any answers. So, I started on this journey of nutrition, and, I had to come to the hard conclusion that I have to fix myself. I'm not going to get any help. So it was a trial and error honestly, it's still trial and error to this day. But, at the end of the day, I was able to fix myself doing it myself, and even confirmed it with scans that show that I had no more issues. And, it's just when you go through something like that and the anxiety and the fear and then coming out the other side, that's what you end up being passionate about. So, that's why I followed through with getting the nutrition certificate, because I know just personally, having talked to a lot of people who have had similar circumstances where they just want to throw their hands up and are like, what else can we do?
Right.
So that's kind of the brief synopsis.
Yeah, and the reason I wanted to build the story from the very beginning of this podcast till that point is because if everything we just talked about didn't happen, I don't know if you're able to figure that out. You have a lot of things going on. The promotion at work, your daughter on the way, and dealing with a potentially fatal thing that was going on, where And even at the time that, like, being his brother, I didn't even have any answers or people for him to connect. He did this all on his own, and to be honest, didn't really say much to other people. He just figured this thing out. Where I decided I didn't know if I wanted to name this a professionalism podcast or figuring it out, because he's figured it out. Like, he's gained all his weight, he's putting on lean mass. We are in the weight room every single day together, in the sauna every single day. You heard that right. There's no misses. And he's the one who educates me on nutrition now. And we are even trying to work together, where people ask me about nutrition. It's like, I got my own thing going on. This is not my expertise. This is his expertise and someone who's done it. And we had Zaccardo on 2 podcasts ago, and he had been talking about the same type of thing, where his was about the lifting end of it, where he had been lifting for 9 years, and now he's at the point where he feels like he's got it. You're in a constant state of trying to fix yourself with nutrition. So, it's just an awesome story in the fact that he came out on the other end. But if you're looking for advice and you're in this area, or you work with me, he's my go-to right now, because he actually knows how to do it, and he did it on himself. And I don't know a better way to trust somebody other than someone who actually has gone through it. Let's move on to the lifting. So I'm going to tell my lifting side story, and then he can talk about lifting. When I first moved home, I was super jacked up. I moved home, and within 14 days, COVID happened. But we were able to still be around each other, obviously. And one day he just texted me, hey, I want to do a power workout. Now, I'm still big brother. We never got to play many sports together. We really didn't get to lift a lot in the last at least 6 years, because we weren't in school together. I was living in a different county. I'm like, let's go. So I built this great, what I think is a great power workout. We both finished this workout. We're wrecked. It has nothing to do with being powerful. I literally wrecked both of us. And he just texted me. I think that was the last day he ever worked out with me ever again. And he's like, dude, I can't move. I wanted to feel good from this. So obviously I know actually nothing about lifting weights. But can you go through your kind of progression of, you worked out always through high school. So let's start there, where you've started at and then where you're at now.
Yeah, so I mean, I think both of us started similarly because of Dad had us working out since we were sub 10 years old.
That's correct.
Probably up through high school, I wouldn't call it functional lifting. It was more bodybuilding style working out. That's what was in vogue at the time. And up through college, kind of the same deal. It was about being strong and trying to put muscle on. And then as you started working in your field and down in Westchester at that facility, and as you worked, up through here, we started to coordinate a lot more on how we're training. And that's shifted the way that I exercise quite a bit. And the way I handled nutrition is still the way I handled training.
Yeah.
I got to the point where I'm doing bench press and my shoulders aren't working. So I'm like, something's not right. So we had to switch up what we're doing. And, it's a constant flux, also just because I get bored of doing the same thing over and over again. But now it's more of the functional training of like I'm an athlete, but also there's no sense of doing certain things where the risk of injury is too high at this point. Yeah. So, I train a bit differently now. There's still certain movements I love and I still incorporate. But, leaning on you a lot more in terms of those movement patterns and what I'm actually like, what's the goal?
Right.
When you're going to work out, what's the goal? Don't just work out to work out. Like, yeah, that's a great baseline to start with. But, if you want to do certain things with your body in certain ways, you want to make sure that you're fostering that with the way you're working out. So
we didn't plan this at all. He spoke that way, but that same message has been on here again and again and again, where it's like, people come in to train with me and they have no idea what they're doing. They don't know why they're training, and I continually ask, we're both baseball guys. Like, what's your approach at the plate? What's your approach in the gym? And him and I go back and forth every day. And I even bounce stuff off of him. He gives me ideas to work on. But we're trialing and erroring this all of the time, where he probably thinks what I'm doing sometimes is psychotic, but then he'll use a little bit into his program. I sometimes will listen to him. Like, was it today or yesterday? He was hitting deadlifts and sprints. And I'm like, That's so awesome. That is one of my favorite pairings of stuff. And we never had that conversation. He started doing it on his own because he knew that the deadlift, which he hadn't done in a long time, made him feel really good. And sprinting, obviously, I've made it a point to make sure he knows that he needs to sprint. Not that he needs me to tell him, but you said in the very beginning, like you approach a lot of things like being an athlete still. And that's how we approach our training. And we do two separate things. But the goal, like you said, the goal is to make sure we're athletic. And now we both have kids. We need to make sure we are the most jacked and most athletic dads at any event ever. So any dads who want to go 2-on-2 and anything, let us know. The most important thing I wanted to talk about with all of those things with lifting and nutrition now is your routine and your habit. Can you just go through what that looks like? Even just like what the past year of routine and habit looks like for you.
Yeah, so like you mentioned briefly, it's up every day at 5, hit the workout. Typically strength, I'll hit weights or some variation of a strength workout, probably at a minimum 5 times a week.
Yeah.
With intermixed cardio, because I just enjoy doing cardio, whether that's a rower, a bike, running. Great if we can play volleyball or spike ball.
Yeah.
And then nutrition wise, I mean, at this point, I feel like I'm pretty dialed in. So because of all the trial and error for such a long time and testing stuff out for blocks of time, I basically eat 3-4 meals a day within a very specific time window that I keep pretty regimented. But I also eat in a way, and I've trained in a way where I don't have to feel anxiety if I want to have a slice of pizza or something. But the routine's pretty consistent. It's 7 days a week, like you said. There's no missing, because when you commit to this lifestyle, you can't. If there's an off day, it's because we're having a family volleyball day where it's 4 hours straight of competing. So that's that's the off day. It's a little bit different. But I mean, baseline, that's basically that's my routine. So
take us into that. That's the health end of it.
Mm-hmm.
You're a dad, a husband. You have a very, very important role that requires a ton of stress. How does your routine for the whole day, your habits, how does lifting fit into that, and your nutrition fit into that? How are you able to stay so consistently successful?
So this comes all the way back down to foundational Bob June principle, which is discipline. And for me, it's writing things out and then executing it. So you put the plan together and you execute it. So for me, the day starts at 5. First thing I do is I write out my workout, and I'll do an entry in my journal about being a leader, about how I'm going to be a leader that day. Then I hit the weights or whatever workout I'm doing that day, and then you and I are in the sauna at 5:40. That's non-negotiable time. I get up, take my son to school, get to work, and it's down to business. We're not messing around seeing how people's mornings are going for a half an hour.
You don't have an hour coffee break?
No, there's no coffee. And it starts again. I eat in a certain way, so at 8:30 every morning I have my protein shake, and that's how I start. And probably hour after that, I'll have my first meal while I'm working, which is pretty consistent. I have 3 eggs, and probably, depending on the workout, maybe a little bit of carbs. I have my lunch. Again, that's a working lunch though, so I'm working all day. It's no stopping. Then I come home. A lot of times I train again, so I'm doing something, usually with my son and daughter present, and then it's dinner. Shut it down with another protein shake, and I'm allotted about a half an hour to an hour of free time with my wife at night once the kids go to bed. And depending on what's going on, that could be making meal plans for people. That could be getting ready for the next day. A lot of times it's reading nutrition stuff or, a podcast. And then we shut it down early to do it all over again the next day. So it's might sound very regimented, but I still have fun too.
I think people are probably listening and go, wow, I can't live my life that regimented. And people sometimes think that regimentation and you can't be so strict because you fall into these habits where if you go off a regiment, you get messed up. Like you mentioned about the nutrition, we believe in something called metabolic flexibility where, if for Jamie's birthday, we have a cake, we're both going to have a piece of cake. But we don't eat cake every day, but we've allotted that. And on the weekend, if you feel like you want to go to the lake, you're still going to get your routine stuff in.
Mm-hmm.
It's not so regimented that it affects you day to day. It's just you're regimented because that's how you keep things done. That's what it sounds like to me, at least.
Right.
Can you just explain briefly your role at your job that you do right now to the layperson over here, of like what it is that you do every day? Because I want to get into that role and how you use professionalism in such a great way.
Yeah, so I manage the mine land reclamation program for the Department of Environmental Conservation. And basically, what that means is my program regulates the mining community. We go out to mine sites, we deal with the permitting, inspecting them, making sure they're in compliance with environmental law in a lot of different areas. And that involves a lot of interaction with miners, the regulated community, their consultants, the public, and then different governmental agencies as well. So I don't want to go into specifics about what's involved in all those different facets.
Yeah,
but
don't get in trouble on the I Know Nothing podcast.
yeah, no. So, but at the end of the day, that's what it is, and it's we cover 9 counties in our region, so I think it's upwards of 250 sites, and there's 4 of us, so
Wow.
it's a big workload, and it's a very complicated workload, and it's obviously contentious given the the industry, so it requires a lot of flexibility. So
the ability to stay professional, and you don't have to go into stories that you tell me every day in the sauna, but like his ability to be professional in such a in such a large role where you have to interact with the public, very, very high profile, rich humans, and this has to deal with people's livelihoods. Like this is a very big deal.
mm-hmm.
How have you got to the point where you can maintain this level of professionalism?
So I think at the end of the day, the biggest aspect of any role is how you construct your relationships.
Yeah.
So, and how you handle yourself in relationship to that. So, when I go to work, the people I work with, I want them to know that I'm an honest person. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do,
Mm-hmm.
And that might mean I'm working with someone where we have an issue, but they know at the end of the day that I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. And, it's not personal.
Yeah.
It's an impersonal relationship where grounded in in an end goal that we're trying to achieve. And if you're able to do that, and it takes a lot of time. Like when I started working, I was horrible at it.
Yeah.
Horrible. Because you don't come out of college with some of these tools. So, and there's a lot of different things that you have to do, especially in a leadership position, if you want to have the respect of the people you work with and the people. In my case, I'm a regulator, so with the regulated community as well. It's a really tough line to walk when you have to have that role. But at the end of the day, that's really what it comes down to. Guys are going to have more respect if they know you mean what you say, you do what you say you're going to do, and you execute. So,
yeah, it's so important. Again, this is a strength and conditioning podcast, whatever that even means. But why did I want to bring him on here? Well, not just because he's my brother, because you did it all as an athlete. You're still an athlete. You've gotten to super successful in your job in a role where you're both passionate about your job as the supervisor for the DEC, but also for nutrition and all of these things. And a lot of times I'm bringing on athletes right now who aren't there and will never get to that point unless they've got these values and are diligent about becoming the leader, becoming professional, understanding all of these things and it's not easy. And I think you hit it on the head where you're just explaining where it's a nonstop. You're relentless at it, at your fitness, at your physical, at your mental. You're constantly learning, and it's not by accident that you show up every day and you're able to do your job, which is what you said in the beginning about discipline, where it's like, yeah, showing up and doing your job. You've been doing that since you've been 15 years old, if not earlier. Okay, we're we're actually doing okay on time. I'm making everybody give me right now. You have the future of you got a bunch of young athletes out there. One piece of advice you have for young athletes going through it right now.
So, my piece of advice would be, and it might not apply perfectly to the athletic realm, but I think it will. Um, there's a great. I'm a big Jordan Peterson fan, and one of his fundamental rules is responsibility lurks. I'm sorry, opportunity lurks where responsibility's been abdicated. So basically, what that means is there are opportunities where people aren't doing what they're supposed to be doing, or they don't want to do them. That's your access point. That is where, if you consistently take on the responsibility of doing the things that other people don't want to do, and that could be on your team,
Yeah.
that could be freaking carrying the ball back to the baseball game, then I promise you, it could take 10 years or it could take a week. You will find yourself moving up the ladder of improvement. And I know that's true because I mean, Dad's been telling us basically to live that way our whole life.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just, you'll take that to your job where it's even more clear cut, where there's certain tasks that just aren't getting done.
Mm-hmm.
And you put them on your shoulders. Because that's what leaders do. And as a young athlete, if you want to continue to move up the ranks, you're going to have to be a leader. Leaders continue to advance. That's the way it goes. So
I don't want to go on the leadership path because that's a different podcast, but it's not easy to be a leader. And we both saw this. We were fortunate enough to have two leaders that were our parents, but not everybody has that. And people and coaches and parents and be a leader. Be a leader. You and I have worked every single day for our entire lives to try to be leaders, and we still don't even think we're that good of leaders, but we try to be.
right.
And that piece of advice is just so important because people might say that you're a natural born leader. Maybe that's the case. I don't know. I haven't met many of them in my personal life, but I know one thing: to be a leader is very challenging. To wake up every day and hold yourself accountable and take responsibilities for things that aren't even
Right.
your responsibility. So it's a great message, and I really hope everyone listens to Jordan Peterson and Jami June. You should be listening to both of them. Maybe we can get a plug for Jordan Peterson on here. Okay, this is the harder one, but you are a parent now. You've already coached now. This is your first year coaching, right?
Yeah.
You're looking at the parents of these young athletes. What's one piece of advice you have for them?
I would just say to parents, and this is probably advice for me too, and it's not anything new, but it's support your kids in the way that not that you want, but that they need. So, I coached t-ball this year. If there's a kid out there that loves baseball, let's foster that.
Yeah.
If there's a kid out there that wants to pick dirt and put his pants up over his head and run around, that's fine. Baseball's not his thing. And
Right.
as a parent, you can't try to make that kid like baseball. You know what I mean? So that's tough because that was my kid out on the t-ball field for a few games. And obviously, with our background in baseball, I want him to love baseball, but he might not. He might love whatever it ends up being. And it's like, whatever that ends up being, make sure they know that you have their back 100%. It's not about you. It's about them. So that's my advice, and it's my advice to me over anyone else.
Yeah, for sure.
So
I think it's great advice in similar ways that's been brought up every time by athletes and by some adults where it's like let your kids kind of love the game. And if you
Right.
don't love the game, find something that you do love. It's been a constant message. Okay, our last two. Something that you're ranting on right now. It can be in life. It can't be about mining though. It has to be.
It can't.
It doesn't have to be about lifting. It can be about anything. One thing that you're ranting on.
One thing that I'm ranting on right now, honestly, one thing I find that I spend a lot of time on is when it comes to nutrition. people don't want to hear it, but nutrition's highly individualized. And
You don't say.
because one person went keto and the other went vegan and someone else is carnivore and they felt good for 3 months doesn't mean that that is the answer for you. So that's something that we could sit here until the moon came out about that, but we'll cut it off there.
It's a perfect one.
Yeah.
He's way better at this than I am. This is why when I'm at a get together, I'm arguing with people about broccoli. Okay, because they're telling me it's the best thing ever, and I'm like, okay, but what if I can't digest it? Great piece of advice. Same thing for training. There is some individualized, piece of it. Okay, let's end on a positive note. Something that you're raving on right now, currently in life.
Something I'm raving
on.
Mm-hmm. Honestly, and again, I don't. This not just raving, but it's a constant reminder. And this answer might get a little bit convoluted, but I think you'll understand what I'm talking about.
I don't know what that word means. Remember, it's me. It's people like me out there listening.
I think, over the past year, you and I have been reminded how short this life can be.
Yeah.
And with kids of our own, I don't take it for granted that could be taken away from me. Mm-hmm. It's a whole separate story, but we spent multiple hospital stays with my daughter in there. And I think we can get lost in the day-to-day of even the grind.
Yeah.
But at the end of the day, there's nothing more important than our kids. Mm-hmm. And living a true life with them, not just going through the motions to, until they move out of our homes. It's everything. And like I said, it's also more of a reminder to me, but it's something I do rave about, and it's something that I have to constantly shift my perspective on, because it's absolutely mission critical, because you can't waste a millisecond. And I think you and I have been reminded of that numerous times. And I think it's good for other people to hear, whether you're a parent or not, whether it's just your relationship to your own parents. That's how quick it can be taken.
Yeah.
And, just it's not worth wasting a second of it.
Couldn't agree more. I think it's a great way to end this. James, thanks for coming on.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Love you.
Love you too.
This is the I Know Nothing podcast. This is a good one. Later.